To add a feedback activity to your course, you can select it from the content picker. Then give your activity a name and optionally add a description for your learners. You can also select whether or not to display this description on the general course page. In the availability section, you can specify when learners will be able to submit feedback. You can enable and set a date from which responses will be allowed, and a date after which responses will no longer be accepted. You can then go on to specify how submissions should be handled. You can choose to make learner feedback anonymous or have respondents' usernames recorded in the feedback log. You can also choose whether or not to allow learners to complete the feedback more than once. If you enable notifications, then course administrators and managers will be notified when learners submit feedback. And finally, you can auto-number questions. Alternatively, you can manually number questions when adding them to the feedback activity. You can specify what learners should see after submitting their feedback. You can select whether or not to show learners an analysis of all feedback submissions. Alternatively, it will only be shown to course administrators and managers. You can also add a custom message that learners will see upon completion of the feedback activity. Finally, you can optionally add the link to the next activity or web page that you would like learners to navigate to after completing the feedback. You can then also add restrictions to control the conditions under which learners will be able to access the feedback activity. And finally, you can add tags to allow learners to search and connect related content. When you then click on Save and Display, your feedback activity will be added to your course. There are multiple tabs that will provide you with relevant data as learners begin to interact with the feedback activity. In the Overview tab, you will see an overview of the number of questions and responses for the feedback activity. You will be able to add or tweak questions in the Edit Questions tab. To add a question, you can select a question type from the drop-down list. You can select whether or not learners should be required to answer this question and then add your question to the relevant input field. The Label Input field allows you to direct learners to specific subsequent questions based on the answer they give here. To do this, you can give your question a name that will be referenced when setting up the subsequent dependency questions. Based on the question type that you have selected, you will be able to specify additional question parameters. You can then click on Save Question to add the question to your activity. To add a subsequent dependency question, select your preferred question type from the drop-down list. Dependency questions will likely not be required questions. You can go ahead and add the question and then specify its parameters. Then from the Dependence Item drop-down list, select the label that you have assigned to the question on which this question should follow. And in the Dependence Value field, specify the answer that a learner must give in the previous question in order to be directed to this dependency question. When you click on Save Question, you will see your dependency question in your feedback activity. In the Template tab, you can save this particular survey's questions as a template for future use, or you can choose to use a template that has already been created in the past. Once learners start interacting with the feedback activity and submitting their responses, the Analysis tab will show a graphical summary of the results of each question. And the Show Responses tab will show all individual responses to the questions in your feedback activity.